The radiant auroras of Zypherion Prime painted the sky in undulating waves of gold and violet, casting an otherworldly glow over the bustling marketplace. Beneath this celestial canvas, the trade hub teemed with life, a chaotic blend of alien merchants hawking their wares, holographic signs flickering in myriad languages, and the hum of spacecraft descending in the distance. Darius Venn, Earth's envoy to the Astrolese Pact, navigated the throng with practiced precision. His black combat suit, reinforced with metallic plates, drew curious glances from the diverse crowd. Among the towering Zarthents, shimmering Seralites, and countless other species, a human was still an anomaly, especially one bearing the diplomatic insignia of a world still carving its place among the stars. The air buzzed with activity, yet something in Darius's gut told him to stay alert. Years of experience had taught him to trust that feeling. Suddenly, amidst the cacophony, he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. A scream. Sharp, desperate, and quickly silenced. It cut through the noise like a blade. He paused, every nerve in his body on edge. The sound had come from an alleyway nearby. Without hesitation, he turned toward the shadowed path, his boots striking the ground with purpose. This wasn't part of his mission, but something told him he needed to act. Moments like these, where instinct overruled reason, had a way of changing destinies. The alley opened into a dimly lit courtyard, where the air was thick with tension and the acrid scent of charged energy. Darius Venn's sharp eyes took in the scene instantly. A group of towering Zarthents, their scaled forms glinting faintly under the glow of a nearby luminescent lamp, encircled a murky pool at the center. Their ceremonial robes, adorned with intricate patterns of crimson and black, marked them as officials of their species' judicial order. But it wasn't their imposing figures that captured Darius's attention. It was the figure they held captive, a young woman, her green skin shimmering faintly even as it was marred by damp strands of chestnut-colored hair. She gasped for air as they pulled her from the pool, her arms and legs restrained by energy bands that crackled with violet electricity. Her black, form-fitting outfit was soaked, clinging to her slender frame, revealing the toll her ordeal had taken. "Tell us the location of the resistance base," one Zarthen demanded, his voice guttural yet clear in universal common. He yanked her head back, baring her delicate features. Her large almond-shaped eyes filled with defiance even as they brimmed with fear. "I've told you," she gasped, her voice hoarse but steady. "I'm just a courier. I don't know anything else." Darius's heart tightened. A courier. He had heard enough in his time as a diplomat to recognize the edge of truth in her words. The woman's micro-expressions, barely perceptible shifts in her face, spoke volumes to him, trained as he was in reading even the most subtle cues. She was terrified, but not lying. One of the Zarthens stepped forward, raising a shock prod. Before it could strike, Darius's deep voice cut through the courtyard like a blade. "That's enough." All eyes turned to him. The Zarthens froze for a moment, their predatory instincts battling against recognition of the insignia on Darius's chest. Slowly, the leader of the group stepped forward, his expression a mask of irritation. "This is an internal matter of Zarthen justice. Human envoy. Your interference is neither required nor welcome." Darius allowed a small smile to tug at his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Funny you should mention that. As Earth's representative to the Astrolese Pact, I have the right to observe and intervene in any legal proceedings that violate the Galactic Charter. And this," he gestured toward the woman's trembling form, "looks far from official." The Zarthan leader's scales darkened, a telltale sign of anger. She has passed through a quantum gateway used by resistance operatives. That alone justifies. Half the couriers in this sector use quantum gateways. Darius interrupted. His tone calm but firm. He stepped closer, and the metallic plates of his combat suit shifted slightly, catching the faint light in a way that accentuated his commanding presence. The Zarthans instinctively backed away, their earlier confidence waning. Underneath her exhaustion, the woman's large eyes fixed on Darius with a mixture of hope and disbelief. He held her gaze for a moment, silently reassuring her before turning his attention back to her captors. Under Article 7 of the Galactic Charter, Darius continued, activating his wrist computer to project holographic documents into the air. I'm invoking my right to take custody of this prisoner for a formal investigation. If you have legitimate evidence, you can submit it to the Astrolese Pact. The leader snarled, his scaled face contorting in frustration. You overstep, human. Darius tilted his head slightly, his smile now predatory. Do I? Because I'm more than willing to notify the Astrolese Pact of this unauthorized tribunal. I'm sure they'll be very interested in the footage my suit has been recording. He gestured to the discrete cameras embedded in his armor. A tense silence fell over the courtyard. The Zarthans exchanged glances, their resolve visibly crumbling under the weight of Darius's authority. Finally, the leader gave a sharp nod, and the restraints binding the woman were deactivated. She stumbled as she was released, but Darius was already there, catching her before she could fall. Her skin was cool to the touch, trembling faintly against his hands. She whispered a shaky, "Thank you," her voice barely audible. "This isn't over," the Zarthan leader hissed. But Darius didn't bother replying. He guided the woman away from the courtyard, his arms steady around her. She moved with surprising grace despite her ordeal, matching his pace as they left the shadows behind. Once they were safely away, he spoke softly. "I'm Darius Venn, Birth's envoy. What's your name?" She hesitated, her voice hoarse but steady. "Alina Serin. And for what it's worth, I really am just a courier." Darius glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "I know. I could tell." Alina stared at him, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. "How?" He tapped his temple. "Enhanced perception and experience. You weren't lying back there." Her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, though her eyes still held traces of fear. "You're different from the others," she murmured. "Most wouldn't have bothered stepping in." "Story of my life," Darius replied, gesturing toward a nearby cafe. "You look like you could use something warm to drink. Care to join me?" Alina hesitated, her gaze flickering to the bustling streets around them. "Not here. Too many eyes." Darius nodded in understanding. "My quarters aren't far. Fully secure. We can talk freely there." Her expression softened, a mixture of gratitude and wariness. "Lead the way, human envoy." As they navigated the crowded streets, Darius couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this seemingly ordinary act of intervention, would lead to something far more extraordinary. Looking at Alina's proud yet weary profile, he found that he didn't mind. Sometimes, the most significant journeys began with a single step into the unknown. Darius's quarters atop one of Zypherion Prime's gleaming towers were a stark contrast to the chaotic streets below. The expansive space was bathed in a soft ambient glow, with panoramic windows offering a breathtaking view of the skyline. Ships of various designs wove a symphony of light as they departed and arrived, the galaxy's endless rhythm of trade and travel. Serin hesitated just inside the doorway, her almond-shaped eyes scanning the room with cautious curiosity. Her green skin, faintly shimmering under the artificial light, bore faint marks of her recent ordeal. But she carried herself with an air of quiet resilience. "You can relax," Darius said, adjusting the environmental controls. "The security here is top-notch. No one will disturb us." Alina offered a small nod and moved to the couch, her steps graceful despite her evident exhaustion. Darius returned with 2 steaming mugs, setting one before her. "Real Earth coffee," he said with a faint smile. "A rare luxury out here." She lifted the cup, inhaling the rich aroma. For the first time, her expression softened, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "Humans and their coffee," she murmured, taking a careful sip. Her eyes widened, and a hint of delight crept into her voice. "This is remarkable." Darius chuckled. "It grows on you." He sat across from her, his gaze steady but non-threatening. "Now, let's talk. You're not just a courier, are you?" Alina's fingers tightened around the cup, her gaze dropping to the dark liquid within. "What makes you think that?" "Your story doesn't quite add up," Darius said gently. "You weren't lying about being innocent of their accusations. But there's more to it. Something you're not telling me." She sighed, setting the cup down. "You're perceptive, Darius. More so than most I've encountered." Her voice carried a mix of weariness and admiration. "Fine. I suppose you've earned the truth." She leaned back, her gaze distant as she began to speak. "My name is Serin, and I'm not just a courier. I'm the first daughter of the Verdant Dominion's ruling dynasty." Darius's brow furrowed. The Verdant Dominion, a coalition of lush, resource-rich worlds, was known for its advanced biotechnology and rigid hierarchies. "Royalty," he said, his voice skeptical but intrigued. "What's a princess doing alone on Zypherion Prime?" "Dodging Zarthan enforcers." "Because my own people want me silenced," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I uncovered evidence that members of the Zenith Assembly, our highest governing body, are secretly supplying advanced, banned weapon technology to various factions, including the Zarthans." Darius straightened, his diplomat's instincts kicking in. "Weapon technology? To both sides of an interstellar conflict?" Alina nodded, her hands clasping together tightly. "It's worse than that. These aren't just weapons. They're biologically integrated systems designed to adapt to their users' physiology. They could tip the balance of power in the galaxy, creating wars that would never end. And my people," she broke off, her voice choked with anger. "They branded me a traitor when I tried to expose them." Darius let the weight of her words settle in the air. "And the Zarthans? What do they want with you?" "They must have learned I was carrying evidence," Alina said. "A data crystal encoded with records of the deals. I hid it before they captured me. But I doubt they'll stop until they recover it." Darius frowned, leaning forward. "Do you still have access to this evidence?" Her gaze met his, steady and defiant. "I do. But I need your help to retrieve it." He leaned back, rubbing his jaw as he considered her request. Helping her meant defying not just the Zarthans but potentially the Zenith Assembly itself, a move that could shatter his carefully built reputation as Earth's envoy. Yet, as he looked at Alina, her vulnerability hidden beneath layers of resolve, he knew he couldn't turn away. "I'll help you," he said finally. "But we need to be smart about this." The Astrolese Pact has protocols for whistleblowers, but we'll need irrefutable proof to bring down a faction as powerful as the Zenith Assembly. Alina's shoulders relaxed, the faintest glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't know if I could trust you. But I'm starting to believe I made the right choice." Darius allowed himself a small smile. "You did. But we need to move carefully. If the Assembly or the Zarthans find us before we're ready—" "They won't," she interrupted, her voice firm. "I've survived this long for a reason. I won't let them stop me now." He nodded, admiring her determination. "Good. Then let's start by retrieving that data crystal. Where did you hide it?" Alina hesitated for a moment, then smiled faintly. "In a place no Zarthan would think to look. A children's library, tucked inside one of the story modules." Darius blinked, then chuckled despite himself. "Clever. But we'll need to move fast. If they're tracking you, it won't stay safe for long." Rising from his seat, he extended a hand toward her. "Are you ready?" She took his hand, her grip firm despite the faint tremble in her fingers. "I've been ready for this my whole life." As they stepped out into the artificial glow of Zypherion Prime streets, Darius couldn't shake the feeling that the stakes were far greater than either of them realized. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was clear: this fragile alliance between a human envoy and a fugitive princess would shape the future of the galaxy. The Zypherion Prime Children's Library was an unassuming structure nestled between towering market complexes, its exterior adorned with whimsical holographic murals of mythical creatures from across the galaxy. Despite its inviting facade, Darius Venn felt the weight of every shadow as he and Alina Serin approached. The Zarthans weren't the type to give up easily, and every passerby could be a potential informant. "Are you sure about this?" Darius murmured, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of pursuit. Alina nodded, her expression resolute. "It's the safest place I could think of at the time." Zarthans aren't exactly known for their fondness for children's tales. "Smart," he admitted, pushing open the library's modest entrance. The air inside was cooler, quieter, the hum of the city muted by thick walls and a well-maintained environmental shield. Rows of shelves brimming with story modules stretched into the distance, and holographic projections of animated characters floated above a group of children engrossed in their reading. Darius followed Alina as she weaved through the aisles, her steps quick but purposeful. "Where exactly did you hide it?" he asked in a low voice. "In the Chronicles of Orion Legends. Third module from the bottom. Near the back," she whispered, her tone steadied despite the tension in her posture. They reached the designated section, a corner tucked away from the main area, where fewer eyes would linger. Alina knelt and carefully slid out the module, a slim, glowing device designed to project interactive narratives. Turning it over, she pressed a hidden latch, revealing a small compartment within. A faint blue light emanated from the data crystal nestled inside. "Got it," she breathed, holding the crystal up triumphantly. "Good. Now let's get out of here," Darius said, his hand instinctively brushing against the hilt of his plasma blade. But as they turned to leave, the atmosphere shifted. A group of figures entered the library, their movements too deliberate to be casual. Darius's enhanced vision caught the distinctive glint of Zarthan scales under their cloaks. His jaw tightened. "They're here," he muttered. Alina's eyes darted to the entrance, her knuckles whitening around the crystal. "How did they find us so quickly?" "They must have traced your biosignature," Darius guessed. "Come on. We need an exit." He scanned their surroundings, quickly spotting a service hatch at the far end of the library. "This way," he urged, pulling Alina along as the Zarthents began spreading out. As they approached the hatch, a low hiss sounded behind them. One of the Zarthents had spotted them, and the others moved in unison, their cloaks thrown aside to reveal shock prods and energy rifles. "Run!" Darius barked, his combat instincts taking over. He pushed Alina ahead and spun around, drawing his plasma blade in a single fluid motion. The weapon hummed to life, its blue edge crackling with lethal energy. The Zarthents hesitated for a fraction of a second, clearly wary of the human envoy who had already outmaneuvered them once. Darius lunged, his blade a blur as it deflected an incoming energy bolt, the heat grazing his shoulder. "Go!" he shouted again, botting Alina precious seconds as she climbed through the hatch. One of the Zarthents rushed him, a shock prod aimed for his chest. Darius sidestepped, twisting his blade to disarm the attacker in a single motion. The alien snarled, but Darius's foot connected with its midsection, sending it sprawling. "Darius!" Alina called from the other side of the hatch. "Hurry!" With a final sweep of his blade to keep the remaining Zarthents at bay, Darius backed toward the hatch and climbed through, sealing it behind him. The hiss of the closing door was followed by muffled pounding as the Zarthents tried to breach it. "Not much time," Darius muttered, grabbing Alina's hand as they dashed through the narrow maintenance corridor. "How do we get out of here?" she asked, her breathing labored. "There's a service elevator at the end of this tunnel. It leads to the upper levels, close to a diplomatic transport dock," he explained. "We'll be safe there." They emerged into a small industrial loading bay, its air thick with the scent of engine fuel. Darius immediately spotted the transport dock ahead, its sleek shuttle gleaming under the overhead lights. But his relief was short-lived. A tall Zarthan stepped from the shadows, flanked by two heavily armed guards. This one was different, its scales darker, its bearing more authoritative, its deep-set eyes fixed on Alina with predatory intensity. "Princess Alina," the Zarthan leader sneered, its universal common heavily accented. "You've caused us quite a bit of trouble." Darius stepped forward, placing himself between Alina and the Zarthan. "You're violating diplomatic protocols," he said coldly. "This is sovereign Earth territory." The leader laughed, a grating sound that echoed in the bay. "Do you think your titles matter here? Human, hand over the crystal, and we'll consider sparing your lives." Darius's blade ignited again, its hum cutting through the tense silence. "You'll have to take it from us." The leader snarled and gestured to its guards. The ensuing fight was swift and brutal. Darius's combat training shone as he deflected energy blasts and dispatched one of the guards with precision strikes. Alina, despite her lack of formal combat skills, used her agility to evade capture, her determination unwavering as she clutched the crystal tightly. The leader, however, proved a more formidable opponent. Its claws slashed through the air with deadly speed, forcing Darius to fight defensively. Each blow pushed him closer to the edge of the dock. "Darius!" Alina shouted, throwing him a small object, a stun grenade she had found among the crates. He caught it mid-air, activating it with a flick of his thumb before tossing it at the Zarthan leader's feet. The explosion of light and sound disoriented their pursuers just long enough for Darius and Alina to board the transport shuttle. Darius slammed his hand on the controls, and the shuttle's engines roared to life, propelling them into the safety of the stars. As the tension in the cabin finally eased, Darius turned to Alina, his chest heaving. "You weren't kidding about being trouble." Alina managed a faint smile, holding up the crystal. But we've got what we came for. Darius nodded, a rare sense of satisfaction settling over him. Now we just have to figure out how to use it to bring down the Zenith assembly. The shuttle hurtled through the void, leaving Zypherion Prime behind. Ahead lay the next stage of their journey, one that promised even greater danger and higher stakes. But for now, they had won a small but significant victory. And Darius couldn't help but feel they were on the edge of something monumental. The chamber of the Astrolese Pact, an awe-inspiring dome of shimmering crystal and pulsating energy conduits, was filled with hushed murmurs as Darius Venn and Alina Serin stepped onto the central platform. Above them, holographic projections of delegates from countless species observed, their gazes a mix of intrigue, skepticism, and anticipation. This was no ordinary session. The fate of the Verdant Dominion, and perhaps the galaxy itself, hinged on what was about to unfold. Darius stood tall, his black diplomatic uniform modified to display faint, glowing patterns on his skin, patterns that now matched Alina's bioluminescent markings. Their synchronized glow was subtle but unmistakable, a testament to the unprecedented bond they shared. Alina wore a modified royal gown, her markings proudly visible, her pregnancy undeniable. The sight alone sent ripples of astonishment through the gathered assembly. As they reached the center, Alina stepped forward, her voice steady despite the monumental pressure. Honored members of the Astrolese Pact, I stand before you not as a fugitive, but as a whistleblower, one who has risked everything to reveal the truth. The Zenith Assembly, my people's governing body, has conspired to ignite perpetual wars for profit by supplying banned weapons to opposing factions. She gestured toward Darius, who activated his wrist computer. A series of holographic projections filled the chamber, displaying damning evidence, encrypted communication logs, transaction records, and detailed schematics of the bio-integrated weaponry. Gasps and murmurs echoed as the evidence scrolled before the audience. Their actions, Alina continued, her voice rising, violate the very principles of peace and cooperation that bind this council together. And yet, when I tried to expose them, I was branded a traitor, hunted, and nearly silenced. One of the Zenith Assembly delegates, his scales darkening in anger, rose from his seat. These accusations are baseless. This human has manipulated. Enough. Darius interrupted, his voice calm but cutting. This is not manipulation. The evidence speaks for itself. But if you need more, then consider this. He gestured to Alina, who took a deep breath and raised her hands. Her bioluminescent markings flared brighter, casting an ethereal light across the chamber. What you see is the result of a bond deeper than politics or species. Darius and I have formed a union that transcends biology, creating a compatibility thought impossible by our people. The chamber erupted into stunned silence as Darius stepped beside her, his own patterns glowing in sync. Our child, he said, his voice steady, is the first of its kind, a bridge between species. Proof that cooperation and unity can achieve what war never will. A religious delegate from the Seralites rose, her crystalline form shimmering. This alignment of patterns, it fulfills an ancient prophecy in our culture. A union destined to bring balance to the galaxy. This cannot be ignored. The words sent shockwaves through the assembly. Religious authorities murmured among themselves. Scientists clamored for further study, and delegates began debating the implications. But before chaos could erupt, the council chair, a regal seraphite with wings of light, raised a hand. Order, her voice resonated. We will deliberate on these matters immediately. The evidence will be reviewed, and the accused members of the Zenith Assembly will be detained for questioning. Guards moved swiftly, surrounding the stunned Verdant Dominion representatives. Alina watched as they were escorted away, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in weeks. As the council session adjourned, Alina and Darius stood together, the weight of their victory sinking in. Outside the chamber, reporters and delegates from across the galaxy swarmed them with questions and congratulations. But Alina's focus was on Darius, who gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said quietly. "We did it," she corrected, her voice soft but resolute. "And this is just the beginning." Months later, on a peaceful terrace overlooking the lush forests of the Verdant Dominion, Alina cradled their newborn daughter. The child's skin shimmered faintly with the combined glow of her parents' bioluminescent markings, her silver-flecked eyes the testament to her unique heritage. Darius stood beside them, his gaze fixed on the horizon where ships of countless species moved in harmony. The galaxy, though far from perfect, was beginning to heal. The exposure of the Zenith Assembly's corruption had sparked widespread reforms, and their union had become a symbol of hope and possibility. "She's perfect," Darius murmured, brushing a finger across his daughter's tiny hand. "She is," Alina agreed, her voice filled with both love and determination. "And she'll grow up in a galaxy that knows the power of unity." Darius smiled, wrapping an arm around Alina as they watched the sunset together. For all the battles they had fought, for all the challenges still to come, they knew one thing for certain: their story was just the first chapter in a new era, one where love, courage, and the bonds between worlds could truly change the stars.